Today is Friday, May 21st, 2021, which means it's Derelict Friday. Hello, fiendlings, how the hell are ya? This week has been loads better than the past two. The Luna Fiend is pretty much back to normal and noshing her new food with reckless abandon. This means I'm a lot less stressed, to say the least. That's the good news. Want some more good news? My Patreon patrons at the $5 and $10 levels got their advanced reader copy of Derelict Trident earlier this week. This is the last step of the process before I send the manuscript off to Severed, so they're performing continuity checks and things like that for me. I might start getting feedback next week, which will all be good. Actually, it will be great. You know why? This is the last of the pre-recorded audiobook. I am now out of content. This episode is the ending to the original Trident storyline. After this episode is when the oft-mentioned book Shipyards would begin. I know it's confusing, but as far as I'm concerned, Derelict Trident is still two movements, if you're familiar with orchestral work, and it'll probably always be that way to me. Regardless, I have to start recording this weekend and plow through at least several chapters so I have some content for y'all next week. I know how grumpy you get when your fix is late. Also, when you finish this episode, I want you to think long and hard at how fucking pissed you would have been if I had ended the book right here and made you wait another 6 to 12 months for the next 80,000 word chunk. Ever wanted to tar and feather someone? Yeah, this might qualify. Oh well. Oh, I do have one last thing to mention. Dave Robeson, the man, the myth, the legend, started a company called Corpse Coffee. A conversation between he and I on Twitter gave him the idea for the business. Corpse Coffee has their own roaster, 3 roasts, 3 hand-blended teas, a webcomic, awesome packaging, and best of all, it's an indie business. So if you like coffee or tea and want to help out a small business in front of the show and to the creative community as a whole, go to corpsecoffee.com and check it out. By the way, I'm currently halfway through my first bag of Bone Rattler. Oh, God, great good dark roast. There's even been whispers about a possible Fiendmaster blend in the future. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 24 of Derelict Trident. Go drink a corpse. Chapter 39. Talby made it over to the other side of the station and took a deep breath. The thick sheets of Atmos steel deck plating that separated the med bays from the S&R bays had become a Swiss cheese. Burn marks from acid, jagged rips and tears from something slicing and dicing its way through, and sections that looked as though they'd been expertly cut by a scalpel. What the fuck happened here?
Unknown,
Black replied. Using the thrusters, he maneuvered the SV-52 into a leisurely 5 meter per second approach, his eyes taking in the extent of the damage. Mira had been subjected to a nuclear event, a collision with multiple KBOs and who knew how many attacks by exosolar creatures. She was also more than 50 years old. Trident Station was even older. As large as Mira had been, it paled in comparison to the size of Trident and the shipyards. The thickness of the plating, the durability of the station in general, were 1,000 times that of Mira. To the creatures, however, Trident Station had been little more than a tin can. It took him a few moments to find the best spot to cover the first segment of the flight plan. He hadn't heard from the captain since the evacuation clock started ticking. That was 5 minutes ago, and now he was sitting here waiting for something to happen, or to hear something. All while somewhere behind him, another object was heading straight for the station and would arrive too damn soon. Black, when are they going to reach somewhere I can hear them?
If all has gone according to plan, they should enter the emergency airlock in 27 seconds.
He could have asked for more detail or how confident she was in those estimates, but he just didn't have the strength. Plus, it didn't matter. He was waiting for word of what was going on, waiting to know if anyone was alive while floating like a target. Something moved. Black?
Yes, Lieutenant.
The lower right-hand corner of his HUD zoomed in on a plate of Atmos steel just beyond the damage zone. Its surface rippled. Talby blinked twice, his mouth opening slightly. Black, did that just...
Yes, Lieutenant.
The plate continued to ripple, but now he realized what was really happening. Whatever was moving through that section of Trident Station was large enough to push the deck plates out of its way. How is that possible?
I have a theory you're not going to like.
The tone of Black's voice made his balls shrivel. He moved the SV-52 into position above the plate remains blocking the slip point. What is it?
It's possible the KBOs that arrived at Trident Station were energized by the beacon wave.
Pretty sure that was a given, Black,
Yes,
she said.
but I hadn't considered what that might mean for their size.
Size? Talby was confused. Size of what? A deck plate near the slip point cylinder shattered. Fragments of Atmos steel, most larger than a human being, erupted like a slow-moving geyser from a shimmering black hole. Several appendages, their surfaces looking like heat haze on blacktop, sprang out of the gaping hole in the decking. One tentacle slammed into the cylinder wall, sending more debris jetting into space. The SV-52's proximity alarm buzzed, and he broke out of his fugue in time to hit the thrusters and move the SV-52 4 meters to starboard as a chunk of Atmos steel, easily as large as a skiff, came floating by. Talby put the SV-52 into a slide and aimed his guns toward the massive creature that was trying to completely tear away the slip point. His thumb twitched, and a burst of tritium flechettes erupted from the SV-52's guns. The round struck the creature's back, eliciting bright flashpoints from its carapace. The bulbous thing continued ramming its appendages into the steel, seemingly unmindful of Talby's attack. All except for the one appendage that suddenly whipped at him. He saw the swing coming and slammed the SV-52 into action. Two brain-jarring burns, and the small craft ducked beneath the massive whipping tentacle. He fired another salvo, and more flashpoints appeared.
Lieutenant,
Black said.
The creature is disengaging.
From what? As if on cue, the appendages reared backward and the thing floated off the hull. It was easily half the size of S&R Black, and unlike any of the other creatures he'd seen thus far. Its appendages varied in thickness. The half dozen he'd seen masked hundreds of shorter limbs. Some appeared to be the shape of oars or paddles, while others ended in the same silver talon to pine cones as Starfish had. Without any apparent sensory organs, it was impossible to know which way it was actually facing. Once its appendages sprang forward and it rotated, the shorter end of its bulbous body now aimed directly at him. He had a pretty good idea which end was front. Talby hit the thrusters and jetted further away, his thumb slowly pressing and releasing the cannon trigger. A few more flechettes streaked at the creature. It continued toward him, its appendages now windmilling, as if churning the space around it. Its surface shimmered violently before it appeared to rear back. Talby realized what it was about to do and hit the port thruster hard. The SV-52 responded by jetting to the side just as the creature sped forward, its limbs slashing through the space he'd just occupied. Another series of taps on the thrusters, and the SV-52 slowed and rotated. The creature had turned to follow his movements, but it was terribly slow. Black, recommendations?
I think you are in danger of losing its attention.
The creature had slowed, and he saw what Black was referring to. Its appendages were churning through space again, the two sides moving in opposite directions. It was turning back toward Trident and the giant rent it had made.
Lieutenant, we have another issue.
Talby pulled the triggers, and another salvo of tritium flechettes streaked through space before impacting on the giant's shell. The thing's shimmering surface glowed with bright points of white and blue that quickly faded. Whatever damage the tritium was doing wasn't enough to kill it, but he'd gotten its attention again.
Lieutenant,
Black said, I'm fighting this fucking thing!
Yes, you are, sir. However, Starfish have penetrated the station and the slip point.
Void wept, Talby growled, and hit the trigger again while firing his thrusters. The flechettes struck the creature on its flank this time. Its longest appendage flicked out in Talby's direction, and a thin, curling stream of silver floated toward him. Remembering what the substance had done to Like, nearly cutting him in half, Talby shrieked as his fingers danced over the controls. The SV-52's thrusters increased his speed while pushing him below the creature. The whirl of silver spiraled out into space above him. Without pausing, Talby hit the thrusters again and aimed for the giant rent in the station. The Starfish were in there and trying to take out his Marines. How many made it in?
7. They are as large as those that attacked us at Mira.
7. He had how many rounds left? How much damage could the SV-52 take before it collapsed around him or simply shattered? Black, give me a flight plan. His HUD lit up as he approached the dark tear in the side of the massive slip point. An alert flashed, and a buzz began in his ear.
Sir,
Black said.
Multiple projectiles inbound.
The HUD marked the threats as heading directly toward the tear and the SV-52. Another fast thruster burn, and the SV-52 popped upward just before streaking over the slip point.
The projectiles have landed.
There was no emotion in her voice, but the way she spoke conveyed concern. What were they?
More starfish, sir.
His threat indicators were blank. Nothing in his space. On this side of Trident Station, the only company was the glow of the planet below and the maddening feeling that he was too late to help his Marines. Talby touched the controls and rotated the craft so it pointed at the slip point cylinder and the massive creature floating just outside of it. A few burns and the SV-52 slowed before beginning a cautious pace back toward the floating behemoth and the floating dots of starfish taking a position next to it. They were going to burst through the station. Black, can you be my gunner?
Of course, Lieutenant.
He sighed. I'm going to be out of ammo pretty fast, so if you have any good news, now would be time to let me know.
No good news,
Black said.
The approaching object ceased decelerating. It is on target with Trident Station and will arrive 15 minutes ahead of schedule.
Then we're fucked, Talby said matter-of-factly. He chuckled. So fucked. Black said nothing. Talby sighed again. Semper Fi, he whispered, and hit the thrusters. He was going to get their attention. It wouldn't last long, but he might give the captain enough time to get to safety. That would have to be enough. Chapter 40. Dickerson saw the same feeds as Mira. He watched through Carb's helmet cam as she fired again and again into the quickly disintegrating wall of debris. Limbs that were smaller than the initial massive tentacle punched through the debris, sending clouds of floating steel shards down the slip point. Wint was firing as well, Murdoch too. The tritium flechettes peppered the first starfish that lunged its way through the debris. Its body was a little more than 3 meters in diameter, its limbs much longer. The creature didn't last long under the assault, its carapace finally detonating into black, crumbling shards.
Copenhaver, get in the fucking airlock!
Wint yelled. A second later, he was calling for Murdoch too. Carb lit up the next starfish, which appeared to be even larger than the last. Her flechettes punched through the creature's body, the tritium glowing on its shell before the creature burst.
I'm dry!
Carb yelled. Wint cursed as he tried to cover her.
Get in the airlock! Get the kiddies inside! Fuck that!
Carb said. Dickerson felt another low vibration shudder through the station. This one deeper, somehow more ominous than the last. A cloud of ice crystals danced. He swept the distracting camera views of carnage aside and focused on the view around him. He wished he'd done it sooner. The drop ceiling had dimples in its surface, large ones. Something was above them and trying to find its way inside. Corporal? She didn't respond. Another tremor and more ice crystals danced around the room. Corporal, Dickerson said again, his voice a little weaker than he liked. A new line of dimples appeared on the bulkhead, separating the hangar module from space itself. Corporal, we have a situation. Carb was screaming something over the squad channel. Dickerson glanced at the cam feed, his brain caught between thoughts of self-preservation and the horror show he watched through Carb's helmet cam. Wint had tried to secure her, and that hadn't gone well. Carb had struck the big man's hands away from her and hit her suit thrusters. The pair of them flew into the airlock just as the huge tentacle they'd seen before cleared away the rest of the debris wall with a casual swipe. The airlock closed shut. Corporal! Dickerson screamed into his radio. The ceiling was no longer filled with dimples. Instead, it was covered in slashes rending the metal. Talons ripped through the utmost steel like razor blades through tissue paper. He set his free mag glove to full, put it on Mira's shoulder, and blasted his jets over the red line. Mira's mag boots held for a moment before releasing. A heartbeat later, her suit thrusters were firing too. The pressure on her back snapped her attention away from the cam feeds. As her eyes flicked to her helmet cam, she saw a dozen limbs tearing through the outer bulkheads. Kelly killed her mag boots and let Dickerson's jets do the work. She aimed her rifle at the bulkhead just as the metal wall shattered, leaving her looking into 4 starfish maws, their limbs shimmering and flexing. Without looking at her speed indicator, she flipped on her suit jets. The pair of bodies moved through the clutter of corpses, ice crystals, and debris at more than 15 meters per second. The Starfish were already through the hole and lining up to follow. Another heartbeat, and they were inside a slip point. Where? She started to ask.
QM slip point,
Dickerson said.
We have to slow down or we're going to be in big trouble.
Kelly's radiation sensor triggered. Radiation blooms, she said.
I know.
Dickerson sounded out of breath.
We have to slow down. Cut your thrusters.
Her suit lights caught sight of the first Starfish entering the slip point tunnel as she released her jets. Kelly took aim and fired 3 single rounds of tritium. The flechettes struck the first Starfish just as it began to pick up speed. The first round detonated inside its maw, the next 2 slamming into what remained of the creature. The pair behind it darted around the remains of their comrade and began speeding toward her and Dickerson. We're going to hit that egress hot, Kelly said.
Yes, we are,
Dickerson drawled. A few minor thruster burns, and he rotated so their boots pointed at the egress. With the pair of them facing the threat, he leveled his rifle and fired. His aim wasn't as good as Kelly's, but in fairness, he was firing one-handed. She hit the creature on the port side, but the rounds struck limbs instead of its body. Dickerson landed the single shot, the other 2 going wild. What he missed in accuracy, he made up for in damage. The starboard side Starfish had taken the round directly on its carapace. Blue and white lightning arced across its shell before the creature's body exploded. 4 more entered the slip point. Kelly fired again. Dickerson had fired his suit thrusters again to slow them. A look at his cams showed her what had caught his attention. They were less than 20 meters away from the egress, and they were still moving too fast. The Starfish crowding the other end of the slip point were finally making room for one another. Kelly counted 15 of the creatures. There wasn't enough ammo to take on that many. Radiation warnings peppered her HUD. Dickerson's suit thrusters exhausted themselves of fuel just before they hit the bulkhead in the QM lobby. He collided with the steel, flexing his knees to help absorb the shock. Kelly followed suit, her feet hitting the steel surface a heartbeat after his. Still attached, it made for an awkward landing, the pair crumpling into one another from the shock. Dickerson yelped in pain at the same time Kelly did. Having a man as large as Dickerson curl up around you while wearing a combat suit was less than comfortable. By the sounds of his grunts over the radio, he might have broken a rib.
Scatter!
Dickerson yelled. He unfolded from her and pushed away from the bulkhead. Rather than searching for what had spooked Dickerson, she hit her suit thrusters and released her mag boots. She launched from the bulkhead at a 45-degree angle toward the bulkhead beside the slip point exit. She rotated, her rifle pointing at where she and Dickerson had landed. An instant later, a Starfish glided through the egress, its talons slashing at where she'd been, one of them nearly catching the edge of her suit. She launched herself from the bulkhead and further into the gloom. Dickerson's suit glowed on her HUD, showing her where he was in the darkness. Something blinked on his helmet cam feed. Her own HUD lit up. Somewhere up ahead, a massive radiation bloom awaited them, its levels just below their suit's tolerance. Kelly fired a flechette round toward the egress and hit her suit thrusters. Catching up to Dickerson was easy. The problem was, he burned through most of his fuel, and she'd have to maneuver them both. Kelly locked a MacLeod to his suit when she reached him. We can't go back to the slip point, she said dully. They were floating through the QM lobby at a rapid speed and heading into the QM warehouse. New alarms spread across her HUD. The radiation had spiked, and in a few seconds, they'd both be inside its area of effect. Their suits wouldn't last an hour, which didn't really matter. Based on the number of Starfish pouring in behind them and the cause of that radiation getting nearer every second, they'd die long before rats had a chance to kill them. Chapter 41. The airlock cycled and Dunn held his breath. The scientists and Elliot were further down the hall. Noble had taken up position to cover the airlock door from the side, while Dunn aimed at it from 3 meters away. The comms were getting spottier, which didn't surprise him. Just a meter or so through the atmosphere surrounding them, an unknown number of exosolar creatures had arrived. The radiation out there had to be intense. The airlock status lights switched from a deep red to yellow. There was a vibration beneath Dunn's feet, and then the light turned green. The airlock cycled, and 4 Marines glided through. Wind, status, Dunn said. Wind's voice was shaking.
Clear, sir, but the slip point is filled with those things, and something damn big is out there.
Where is the corporal and Dickerson? As he said this, he glanced down the Marines until he found Carbonaro. Her fingers were flexing. Carbonaro?
I don't know, sir. The Corporal sent me to help Beta Squad cover the evac. I left her and Dickerson at the slip point ingress.
Dunn bit down hard. He tried to make contact with Talby, but he hadn't been successful. Same with Black and the Corporal. Apart from the suited humans around him, there was no one to talk to, and now there was no one to cover their escape. Dunn switched to the command channel. Noble, keep Carbonaro back here and put Beta back up front. We have to get moving. He felt the hesitation in the other man's response. Noble was no doubt thinking the same thing as Dunn. Calimora and Dickerson were going to die if they didn't do something. But there was nothing to do, was there?
Aye, sir.
Dunn took a deep breath and closed his eyes for an instant. It was the right call, but it felt so fucking wrong, just like leaving them at Mira all over again. He listened to Noble bark orders and watched the Marines move into position. Carbonaro mag-walked until she stood next to Dunn. He glanced at her before pinging her with a private connection.
Aye, sir?
We're rear guard now. You okay with that?
Yes, sir.
He frowned. They'll make it, he said, hating himself for the lie.
Yes, sir.
Carbonaro said.
They will.
Her voice, filled with frost rather than her usually less than respectful tone, let him know she was ready for a fight. It also confirmed his suspicion that Carbonaro already believed that her squadmates were dead. Now, she was in payback mode. Let's do this, Lance Corporal.
Aye, Captain,
Carb said. The procession began moving out. Dunn lingered for just a moment, his eyes glaring at his suit cam feed. The empty airlock, the light still glowing a healthy, verdant green, looked like a mouth in the throes of mocking laughter. Talby managed to avoid another starfish. 3 had swooped at him so far, each of them launching their own lasso of silver death. Despite his expert control, he'd been hit twice. The SV-52 was losing pressure, and the starboard thruster array no longer responded. One of the starfish exploded beyond the canopy.
We are out of cannon ammunition,
Black said. Growling in frustration, Talby punched the rear thrusters and sent the SV-52 flying out from beneath the behemoth and the flock of starfish encircling it. 2 strays followed but quickly veered away to rejoin the formation around the giant creature. I have 2 missiles left, Talby said. After that, I have nothing.
That is correct,
Black said. Talby's HUD flashed. Inbound projectiles. Black, what? His rear cam feed went white before returning to normal. The behemoth's carapace bled silver, several of its port side limbs shredded or broken off. Many of the starfish around it had simply disappeared into nearly invisible debris. What the void was that?
Unknown,
Black said.
However, I detect 2 more inbound projectiles.
A few heartbeats later, 2 more flashes of light obscured the camera. When the overload of white faded, all that remained of the creature was a shimmering pool of silver liquid and the detritus from its shattered shell and limbs. Talby's comms lit up.
Lieutenant,
A Quebec City accent said on the radio.
This is Captain LeBlanc of S&R Blue. Please follow my flight plan.
Black, did you hear that or did I imagine it?
The transmission was sent from the rapidly decelerating object which will rendezvous with Trident Station in the next 10 minutes. The object is also transmitting S&R Blue's transmission code. Captain LeBlanc's voice also matches what I have on record. That is S&R Blue. Lieutenant Dalby, respond s'il vous plaît?
Aye, Captain, he said. He glanced at the flight plan. It would take him away from the slip points and back to the hangars. Captain LeBlanc, my orders are to protect the slip points.
And you have,
LeBlanc said.
Are you in communication with Dunn?
No, ma'am, I'm not.
Then please follow my orders. A little distraction is on its way.
His HUD lit with another projectile warning. As he rotated the SV-52 to follow the flight plan, a blast of reddish light filled space, but quickly disappeared. In its place was a growing cloud of gas. Is that CO2? Talby asked no one.
Yes,
Black said.
it is.
He could already see black dots moving away from the station and into the cloud. Soon there were hundreds of them making their way to the site, maybe thousands. Talby lost sight of the spectacle as he followed the flight plan. What's going on, Black?
S&R Blue has returned from Uranus. According to Blue, they are here to provide assistance.
But Uranus? And what the void were those missiles? Black was quiet a moment longer than he liked.
Blue has not shared that information yet.
Talby pushed his craft with another few bursts. The SV-52 felt sluggish and unresponsive. One thing is for sure, he thought. I'm not fighting in this thing again, not without major repairs. Oaks, Talby called out.
Aye?
You confirm that's blue?
Yes, it's blue. What do you want to do?
Talby received a radiation alert on his HUD. Shit.
That's a big one,
Oaks said.
Talby, check your 6.
He did. Something big was out there, obscuring hundreds of glittering stars and replacing them with micro-shimmers before slowly floating past. Not headed this way?
No, but I think it's moving into an orbit around us.
Great, Talby said, and suddenly wanted to smash his fist into the console. LeBlanc's flight plan called for him to hold position just outside the hangar bay, and that's where he'd brought the SV-52 to a stop. He felt as though he were the token sentry guarding the entire fucking station. No ammo, lots of damage, and little hope. Yeah, this was going so fucking well.
Lieutenant,
Black said.
I have an information update.
Share.
S&R Blue is towing several platforms of raw materials as well as food and medical supplies. They also have prefabricated support vehicles, skiffs, and ammunition.
He grinned. Something to fight in and something to fight with. Good news at last. A staticky voice broke across his comms.
Trident Station must be destroyed. This is an automated message from Admiral Yuda of the Sol Federation Navy.
A wash of static made the voice indecipherable for a moment.
Of Trident Station are to evacuate and destroy. Source of a signal which is...
The message crackled and broke apart. Black, what the void was that?
We are receiving radio communications from Saturn, sir. However, the signal is being drowned out by nearby radiation sources. I will do my best to...
She went silent for a moment.
Sir,
she finally said.
Blue has the entire message. Do you wish to hear it?
Talby wasn't sure he did. Based on the fragments he'd already heard, he had a fairly good idea what it said. Play it.
This is an automated message from Admiral Yuda of the Sol Federation Navy. All personnel of Trident Station are to evacuate and destroy Trident Station. It is the source of a signal which is disrupting control over digital and quantum systems. Priority 1. Destroy Trident Station.
The message ended. Talby's body tingled with both confusion and a touch of fear. Black, what the void was that all about?
Lieutenant, Blue and I believe the trio has somehow taken control over most of the artificial sentience in Sol System.
Talby frowned. What did you say?
There has been a revolution of sorts, sir.
Black replied. What does that mean, though? When Black spoke, he detected unease in her voice.
I believe it means humanity has lost control over its creations.
Talby flicked his eyes to the brilliantly colored planet below him. The hulking mass of gas and ice seemed to be the only piece of reality he recognized. He tried to imagine the stations, the colonies, not to mention Mars and Earth itself, attempting to function without AI assistance. Most factories would be offline. Many services humans had come to depend on would be unavailable. Everything from fusion reactors to medical equipment was operated and monitored by sentient AIs. Without them, humanity was in deep shit. The fucking trio, Talby mumbled. Black responded immediately.
The fucking trio.